because that was the biggest shot to the jaw of every single Miles Morales hater out there that there has ever been. It literally shook me to my fucking core. Does poetic justice even begin to describe that moment? What's up, people? We just finished Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I am fresh out of the theater. Yes, you've had a full weekend to watch Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So if you don't want anything spoiled, there will be some spoilers. I'm not going to do a top-down breakdown of the entire plot. I'm just going to talk about what makes this movie so goddamn incredible, so unbelievably good, so unbelievably great, and maybe even unmatched. My friends know that I do not like spoiling movies for people. I like to leave them to have their own expectations of things. I have not been able to contain my excitement whatsoever about this movie. It was, you know what? Why wait? Why wait for any longer? Guys, let's just get into it. I'm Jeff. This is the first reaction to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Let's just start things off with the way that this movie and Into the Spider-Verse have changed the game, and that is the animation. I think it's best we start off where the movie starts off, and that is the Gwenverse, the Gwen Stacy universe. Just as in the previous movie, each character has a different animation style than the rest. And Gwen's universe, with its mesmerizing array of watercolor painted backgrounds dripping into the foregrounds, it added so much to the scenes with herself and her dad, the emotions, the way that the colors would change with each emotion that the two were feeling. It made things so much more intense. I was so hooked, so pulled in. It was honestly incredible to watch. It was my personal favorite, like I said. The animation, the colors, the way they just popped and exploded, the way they just kind of dripped all over everything. It was just so unique and so different. You guys let me know in the comments below what your favorite animation style was, but I'll get into the rest as you do that. What was also an interesting choice to me was the breakaway from the 1s and 2 frame mixes that they had in the first movie, where they pretty much went almost 50-50 with those as they were kind of trying to explain things. And if you haven't seen my breakdown of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you can watch right there in the top hand corner. Go back, watch that, and then come back and that'll explain everything I'm talking about here with the 1s and 2s and all that. But in general, this movie has much more of a smoother feel, smoother look to it in general compared to Into the Spider-Verse, especially in Miles' universe specifically. And there was absolutely a different look to all the characters, down to even the way that their hair was texturized. It's small, it's subtle, but it still works perfectly. It still looks like the same movie you watched before, but with a little bit of a different style. And you might like one over the other, and yes, they are very, very similar, and some of you may not even notice that, but either way, one's not really better than the other. Like I said, they're both just really interesting ways to do it, interesting ways to kind of work with the flow, the themes, the emotions that they're trying to portray on screen. And there was still plenty of other diverse looking characters, like Hobie's sort of newspaper cutout style that changed colors as he walked around. They really made him stand out from the rest. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Hobie later. I know he wasn't in the movie that much, but man, let's just say the online presence of Hobie Brown has, yeah, it's changed right now. People are talking. Another thing that was pretty incredible to me is how this movie somehow had even better music than the first. And I'm not a music guy, so I can't really go in depth in that way or anything like that. But as far as just pure vibes, the way the music helps you feel and kind of direct you in each and every scene, each and every moment, it was a really awesome job. I'm gonna be listening to the soundtrack for a while. I honestly don't know when I'll stop because it is fire. Now, let's get into the real meat of this, the story. And I'm actually gonna start off a little bit differently here though. I'm gonna start off with how this movie worked the meta, the fan service in the most seamless way that I have ever seen it done. I am not a big fan of fan service, and the reason for that is just because all I have ever seen fan service used for, generally speaking, outside of Into the Spider-Verse, where it was kind of, you know, not used as much as this movie, but regardless, it's generally always been kind of forced. It's kind of like so much reference humor. Like if you ever watch Family Guy, it's kind of like that, where everything just feels jam-packed and it feels like it really undercuts every bit of writing in a story. In this case, this movie, in my mind, is fan service done perfectly. And I do mean perfectly. Like, they had the memes, they had, you know, the shots at Ben Reilly and stuff like that, him being sort of very edgy and all that. They had, of course, all the stuff of Miles. They had Genki, who they kind of just dropped in there playing the Spider-Man 2 game. There was so much in there for you to take in, and it was just like nice little Easter eggs here and there. There were some funny ones, like I mentioned, with Ben Reilly, some good shots that they took in there, but then there was also some heartfelt moments where we saw the return of one of the most highly anticipated Spider-Mans, the one that a lot of people do love. If you ever watch the show Spectacular Spider-Man, that one made an appearance, and you saw all the other Spider-Man going through their pain, their trauma, and that sort of collage of all the Spider people, all the web slingers going through their traumas as this sort of thing that they all go through, and I thought it was so respectfully done. And that's the main thing, right? If you're a fan, you want to feel respected. You want to be talked down to. It's not just about the memes. And yes, we all saw the Spider-Man pointing meme, but it was so well done. It was perfectly timed. It was funny, and it didn't undercut anything. But there's a lot of movies that will just throw memes in there, and it also feels like it's sort of like, you know, boomers talking to kids and not fully understanding it, or them just doing it for the sake of doing it, and it's sort of lazy writing. This isn't that at all, not whatsoever. As a fan, I just feel respected, and that's the most important thing. I don't know how you guys feel. I hope some of you felt the same way, that they kind of showed respect for you, that they had a knowledge, and that maybe even that they were fans just like you were. I don't know to what extent everybody in the team is a fan of the comics or whatever, but it definitely felt that way, and I think that is exactly the way it's supposed to feel, in my opinion. But now let's get into it. The story, the plot, the characters, all of that. Obviously, like I said, we're not going to go top to bottom, so don't worry, but yes, some spoilers will be in this 100%. So let's talk about what makes Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse's story so damn good. Now, one thing I do love about this movie is the different types of growth that we're seeing. Everybody's kind of growing, but it's different things, different stages of growth in people's lives and everything like that. You can see that with Gwen and Miles being teenagers, and then Rio and Jeff being adults and being parents and kind of growing and evolving as parents. It was really nice to see, because you almost never see that, and you don't really see that in real life, unfortunately, with a lot of parents kind of not realizing that they also still have room to grow and that they can still mature, even though they're trying to get their child to mature too. You see Gwen trying to get over the loss of her best friend Peter, and the way it shattered her life, shattered the relationship between her and her father without her father even knowing it, and then eventually causing her to leave her entire universe because of it. And then in the end, that incredible heartfelt moment between her and her father. It's crazy to me how many good moments that this movie had, because you don't really see that. And not only that, they're not just good for the sake of being happy. Again, it just all feels earned in this movie, doesn't it? I don't know, that's how I feel whenever I've watched this. I couldn't believe that Captain Stacy actually put down the badge and decided to quit the Force because of what happened between him and his daughter, that he realized something, that he matured in such a way. And the other part of Gwen Stacy's growth is not just moving on, but also worrying about getting attached to someone, worrying about getting attached to someone like Miles, especially knowing what she knew about him, knowing what had happened to him, and knowing how the Spire Society, and I guess Miguel O'Hara, were kind of talking about Miles, the person that she really loves and connects with, and on a deeper level. I also did not expect to love the love story between Miles and Gwen, the way Gwen would be pushing away knowing what she knows, the way Gwen would try to not lead Miles on because she couldn't fight her feelings and he couldn't fight his, and then eventually him getting his heart broken a few times by her. And at the same time, I found myself not, rooting for either one. You understood where both of them were coming from. You understood why both were getting upset and why both made the decisions that they made, which I like. I think in a lot of romances too, we always see people taking sides, and I don't think that's how love always has to be. I mean, to put it simply, it's just a beautiful love story. I mean, hate to be cheesy about it, but it just was. It was like almost perfect. To be fair, he wasn't in this movie throughout, but if you just look on Twitter, man, you look anywhere, Hobie Brown, the stocks are through the roof. I think this version of Hobie Brown is how he's gonna be written maybe forever. And it's amazing that they got Daniel Kaluuya to play him, who played Fred Hampton in Judas and the Black Messiah. So it's kind of very interesting that they used him to play the revolutionary in this movie, and just the vibes were just perfect. I don't even know how to explain it. It was just so perfect the way they did that. I would love to see more of him a little bit in that movie. I mean, people are going nuts about him anyway. He just also looks so cool. I hope we get some more dope comics from him. I think There's gonna be a big push for those for sure. So hope that they're written in kind of like this same sort of vibe, the same sort of dude. I also really liked the growth and evolution of Spot. You know, I didn't really know exactly what to expect with what they were doing. Spot's kind of a joke character, right? But they tried to turn him into something bigger. That's exactly what happened in this movie, is they literally just did that. They made him a joke. He was a joke character, but then you're like, oh, he kind of has a point. He has like a real past. He has an attachment that makes sense for Miles. It made so much sense the way everything was stripped from him. His identity, his entire life was taken from him, in his mind by Miles, obviously by a cruel twist of fate. And he just wants to feel worth it. He wants to feel worth it not just to Miles, but to everybody, to himself. And what I thought was so interesting is the little line he said, I thought I need to get rid of my spots, but instead I decide to get even more spots, meaning like instead of forgetting about the damage, you know, embracing the damage, which is something a lot of people do. People, as I've talked about in another review series, my React series on Miles Morales the comic, we've talked about how a lot of times people will use their pain to drive them forward, to move them forward in life, and that's exactly what Spot did. And then he became more powerful than ever, it seems like, and we're really gonna unfortunately have to wait to see just how powerful he's become and what exactly is going to happen in Beyond the Spider-Verse, the sequel to this movie. And of course, if we're gonna talk about villains in this movie, it is sort of a split villain role, with Miguel O'Hara being kind of an anti-hero, a very villainous, seemingly anti-hero in a way. At least that's the feeling you get because of the way he speaks to Miles, which I'm gonna get to in a second. But Miguel O'Hara, another person that's trying to grow, or at least in his mind maybe thinks that he has. Obviously, in his story, he erased not just one person, but eventually an entire universe in his mind due to some selfish act. But realistically, if you really look at it, it was kind of a noble act. Him going into that universe, accidentally killing a Miguel O'Hara, I mean, how can you even say that that's his fault? It was something completely random. He had no idea what he was doing. And sure, maybe he wanted a family, but he did adopt a child that did not have a family, a father. Miguel O'Hara in this universe is a very flawed and a very scarred character, but you kind of feel for him. And then he does all the other stuff, and you're like, oh, this guy is kind of wild, kind of messed up. But he did an amazing job of being antagonist in this story. I thought he was literally perfect, and I'm gonna get to exactly why. If you've seen the movie, you probably know where I'm getting to, but let's just talk about exactly what this whole thing kind of broke down into, and some more meta stuff that I thought was really cool. In my opinion, the theme, the central message of this movie is basically the status quo versus the revolutionary. And that's why I think Hobie Brown kind of being in the background a little bit is almost an extension of the writer's feelings on a lot of things. If you listen to what he says and his little quick remarks and that throughout the movie, you kind of see where they're coming from and where they eventually do go, with him eventually joining back up with the sort of disbanded Spire Society rejects, or whatever we're going to be calling that team we saw at the very end of the movie. It's this sort of idea of Miguel's ideology, his keeping it status quo, keeping it by the book, and doing what you can to save as many people as possible. But at the end of the day, if people fall through the cracks, they have to fall through the cracks. It's not what they want, but it's just what happens. So it's about the status quo of that versus the revolutionary thinking of a Hobie Brown, Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy, Peter B. Parker, and all them thinking, well, no, I can do more. I can do both. Why can't it be both? Why can't we save more people? That it should not be about saving as many people as possible and dealing with the sacrifices of other people and dealing with the sacrifices in your own life, but to say, no, why can't we just do more? Why can't we do more good? Why can't we save everyone? And that is such an awesome message to have, because there is so much status quo in comics and in real life, because they're scared of little spillovers and they're only satisfied with what they can do and kind of just accepting what they know that they can do instead of trying more, trying new things. That's what this team of spider people, these web slingers, these Spire Society rejects, whatever we're gonna call them, is what they're doing. That's what they're all about. That's what Miles is all about. And then eventually, after that whole chase, after this whole epic chase, this clashing of ideologies, we see Miles at the top of this rocket train. Honestly, wasn't exactly sure what it is. He's got the attention of the Spider Society. Every Spider-Man, woman, whatever, they're on him. He's gotten them to the brink of defeat, basically. And then Miguel comes in, and he's got his whole almost villainous monologue, this disdain for Miles. And If you're a Miles fan or you're a comic book fan and you're kind of in tune with things, you know exactly what that speech at the end there and his mentality towards Miles represents. It is every single Miles Morales hater, the guys who are constantly saying for the past, I don't know, however many long months it's been of them just piling on this idea that Miles Morales isn't Spider-Man. This whole thing where he just comes in and says, you're not even supposed to be here. That spider was never supposed to bite you. And because that spider was never supposed to bite you, another Spider-Man never existed and another one got killed in your universe. You're not even supposed to exist. That, oh my God, just got my blood boiling in that moment. I was so in there. And then Miles comes out and says,
everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
And people, if your hairs weren't standing up, shooting out of your arm, I felt that line in my soul. Miles beating literally every single other Spider-Man, literally every single one that came before him, outsmarting them all at the same time. I have never in my life felt a moment in a movie, a show, a comic book like that one right there, because that was the biggest shot to the jaw of every single Miles Morales hater out there that there has ever been. I don't think we will get a single bigger W than that right there. I mean, who knows, they may top it in the next one, but right now, that's the biggest moment. That's one of the biggest moments, I think. I genuinely mean this. I do not get pulled in that much by movies. I have a pretty high bar. You can ask my friends, I'm the biggest pessimist. I've never been pulled in to a moment in a movie like that one just did. It literally shook me to my fucking core. Like, incredible. The amount of subtext that's in there is just, perfection. Does poetic justice even begin to describe that moment? If you're a Miles Morales fan, that had to feel good. And I want to know how you felt about that moment in the comments below. Please tell me, because it was just so damn good. I ate up every bit of that. And it was just, again, another example of how they actually feel like fans. They feel like they feel the exact same way you do about Miles and the Miles haters out there. I'm gonna try and calm down and get into my final thoughts here. I'm honestly lost for words at this point. It's tough to even feel like I'm even scratching the surface of how I feel about this movie. How this movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, made me feel about one of my favorite characters. And honestly, this is definitely my favorite version of Miles Morales, and it's not even close. And that's saying something, considering that the Spider-Man PS4 video game, that one is an amazing version of him. The comics, we've had some great stories with him too. And this one just easily just kills it, knocks it out of the fucking park, man. Unbelievable. To me, this is not just one of the best comic book movies. It's not just one of the best Spider-Man movies. No, it's one of the best movies I have ever seen, period. Like, it is just top to bottom so good. And then they had that twist at the very end where Miles, instead of going back to his own universe, actually went back to the universe where his spider came from, and he found Uncle Aaron alive, his father in that universe dead, and himself turned into the Prowler. I don't know what we're gonna see in this next one, because once again, this movie gives me anxiety, because just like in Into the Spider-Verse, I had anxiety going in, and they set the bar so high, I didn't know this one would be even close to that one, and it ended up being, honestly, it feels like twice as good at least. It's probably my favorite movie of all time now, and I'm just blown away. I don't know how they're gonna do better in the next one, and if they don't, not a big deal, but like, they keep surprising me every single time. But hey, listen, I don't have much left to say. I want to hear what you guys have to say, because I want to talk more about this movie with you guys. Leave a comment below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this, if you like Miles Morales, don't worry, we got a lot more content on this channel, so subscribe, and see you guys in the next one. And I'm gonna go watch Across the Spider-Verse all over again.